All right, guys, what's going on, man? Welcome to our welcome to our live event, webinar, whatever it is you want to call it. But man, we're going to be talking about proving ad impact in 2026, which I have Keith Putnam Delaney, who's CEO of Primer, here with us. Keith is Primer. Keith, you should describe a little bit about what Primer does. But I've been using Primer for almost all of my clients this year to do exactly what we're going to talk about here, which is utilizing more B2C channels for B2B motions, and I've been getting tremendous results with it. With especially with a couple of my client use cases where we like LinkedIn to just being a really expensive channel, wanting to just be more omnipresent in other places, and have seen like terrific results with it. So I'm gonna walk through a couple of those aspects with you. Keith, do you want to introduce yourself and also describe a little bit about what Primer does before we kind of get a little bit into the material overall?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everybody, and Matt, thanks for having me.
Hmm.
My background's in kind of B2B growth marketing, and one of the challenges I think I faced back when I was running, chunks of the Dropbox growth team was expanding into B2C channels and making it work. And I think now as we go into the new year, with rising sort of LinkedIn CPMs, which we're going to talk about, with sort of search paid search hitting a ceiling. Um, you know there's no choice but to start looking at other channels. And one of the hardest things about expanding into other channels is actually measuring them, for a variety of reasons. But like it's one of the biggest ones being desktop versus mobile. And yeah, that's so it's a strange topic to be passionate about, but I am. And with Primer, what we do is we help with the audience targeting side of things. So we've built essentially a database of B2B contacts, that you can use that have really high match rates on B2C channels. So it's sort of taking your database or our database and allowing you to match it across Google, across Meta, Reddit, TikTok. And that sort of helps unlock, I think, a lot of these channels, because if you can't reach your audience with, sort of constraints, you can't make it profitable, those channels profitable.
For sure. All right, so I actually got a little bit of material to walk through, so I'm excited to go through that here. I remember when I like everyone does like their end of year kind of predictions, right? Like everyone's gonna come out with those over the next 4 weeks. And I remember last year, just watching more people talk about the need for more direct attribution from campaigns. And I remember just watching that conversation happen on LinkedIn and
Mhm.
getting a little apoplectic about it. Like it's such a constraining way to run your paid media when most people are passive consumers of your content on ad platforms, and you basically constrain yourself or you limit yourself to only doing direct response marketing by and large when you limit yourself to that kind of thinking. And I think what I want to try to bring in to the group here is thinking a little bit more through the idea of holdouts and incrementality, and then like measuring just differences in like I do this, I do X and Y happens, and here's the leading indicators and the lagging indicators of what happens with that. So that's what I really want to walk through here overall with the group. And let me share screen, and I can get I'll get this deck up real quick. And yes, I will we will share this afterwards, just as a perfunctory promise overall. But yeah, I think like one of the things that like I'm seeing, and that I know that you see as well with a lot of your clients, is just like what's happening in B2B ads at the moment. And I think there's like four things that I really identify, especially with because we really live in an advertising duopoly in B2B SaaS, where like it's Google and it's LinkedIn, and every other channel is just too hard to convince finance or senior leadership to pour any real budget or energy into. So I think the big things that I'm seeing overall that that are troubling people with other channels like that is one, signal loss. Like website pixel tracking is less and less effective. You have on Meta, you have 7-day and 1-day attribution windows. That makes it really difficult with long purchase cycles, right? To make that work unless you're tracking like the very, very, very first indicator, like a demo request, or if you have the ability to track a book meeting, you can get that as well. And the other thing is just like there's no cross-device tracking really anymore across these platforms, right? Most of what you deliver in an ad platform is mobile. Like if you break your devices out on LinkedIn, you're going to see like 80 to 90% of the impressions you serve are mobile, and there is no way to control for that. Right? There's a little more control with that on Meta, but like even if you were to do that, you'll spend a lot more on mobile still because that's what most people are on when they're consuming. The CAC also is just like the CAC goes up as you scale, man. Your headcounts, your budgets, your targets, it just creates a lot of go-to-market inefficiency, right? And you get asked to spend a lot more quickly without really being able to validate that spend overall. So you just kind of throw more money at the problem without really having a plan for figuring out how effective it is. The ABM fatigue is really real. You're just seeing a lot of pushback on the demand base and the 6 Sense instances. They're uber expensive. It takes a ton of alignment overall with sales and marketing. That is difficult to orchestrate. And then the other thing is ABM is a little self-limiting for a lot of companies as well. I mean, when you constrain yourself to 1,000 accounts to go promote to or campaign to, like you're really only getting measure on those overall. So I think having the ability to have a dual motion and ABM and a straight more of a segmentation targeting positioning kind of approach where you understand your CRM data and don't constrain necessarily to an account list is are things to consider. And then the channel costs. Like LinkedIn, there's more and more entrants onto LinkedIn all the time. There's more products that LinkedIn is rolling out, the thought leadership ads, there's just conversation ads. There's just a lot of different LinkedIn ad types, and it's just making the cost more expensive, right? You can do the manual bidding, you can put bid strategies in place, but anytime you put a bid strategy in, like manual bidding, for instance, it puts a thumb on your reach. Like that's just kind of a consequence of doing that. So like everyone talks about like doing manual bid strategies and getting 80% audience penetration is a lot of magic thinking when put into practice. You actually get more like 30, maybe 40% audience penetration, depending. So I think that's really like kind of the tension that's happening a lot in B2B advertising right now. I think these four things are kind of paramount to that. Do you have anything you want to add on that, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think people think enough about or talk enough about the mobile desktop divide, right?
Yeah.
And how that's fundamentally shifted performance marketing for B2B in the last 4 to 5 years. It used to be that majority of search, Google search was still desktop. It used to be even like a couple years ago that LinkedIn was 50-50 or more or less. That shift means like multi-touch attribution breaks. And everybody basically justifies their budget based on, first touch, last touch, or something in between.
Or
And
influenced.
or influence, right? Yeah.
Right.
And that's like, I mean, like just taking a first principles approach to it, you can't do that anymore, right? Like
Right.
my sessions on my mobile device aren't going to be tied back to me who ends up converting on desktop. So you're constantly undercounting those channels that are mobile, and you're skewing yourself towards the channels that still have some higher proportion of desktop, and then that exacerbates the rising costs of those channels, right? Of search and of LinkedIn. So it's sort of like a snowball effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I just think the cross device thing is just it's just so important to like you can't understate it and there's no way to game it for yourself. Even
Mm-mm.
if you split it on where you can, like you can do it on Reddit and you can do it on Meta, but like just it's just market dynamics. So many more people are active on those places on their phone than
Yeah.
on their desktop. Like we as B2B marketers are extreme exceptions to that rule because that's our job, right? So if you're promoting to marketers or salespeople, yeah, you might see a little bit of a higher skew there. But if you're going outside of that, it's, there's really no way to game that for yourself primarily.
Yeah, yeah, and I always like to think about, when I'm coming up with strategies is, what are the things that, other people aren't doing that could be effective, right? And it's funny how channels are cyclical in that way, like nobody did events for a while. Now everybody's doing events,
Events are
right?
so back.
Now it's saturated and so on and so forth with, out of home and then out of home, So these things happen in cycles. So it's sort of, t again, taking a little bit of the I don't know, like the contrarian viewpoint in your strategy can actually pay dividends. And that's why I'm excited about this topic, because if you can measure it, you can justify it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just going to this, like just the state of paid media is hard. I mean, it would just take all the kind of other aspects, but like let's just get it down to brass tacks and just running paid media right now, especially like paid social, which is what most of us here run, right? Primarily. Like there's four issues I think that are just I think are silently like really killing people. And the first one I think is just the limits of direct response. Like it's expensive to run and you got to get it right initially. It takes a ton of alignment with sales. You need to really, really nail your offer. There's a lot that goes into that. We covered that in our last event with Kai Shaw. He's tremendously talented at that. We are doing a lot of the things that he's built that business on and working on that indirect response. But it's hard to get that right, and it just has a limit. There's a ceiling to it. Only so many people in your sellable attainable market are in market at a given time, and so you'll be able to convert those into a sales process. The brand investment piece, right? It's super murky to measure, like multi-touch influenced. It works when the company is growing. Like when everything's going well, these things tell a good story and, people nod their head and they're like, okay. But when it's stagnant or when it's not, and yet those two things still show positive ROI, then all of a sudden people start asking questions like, well, just how impactful are those impressions? Or, is that money better spent elsewhere? And other thing is, those things really only work to justify LinkedIn because it's so costly to run. So you see when Dream Data or when Hockey Stack are putting these state of multi-touch attribution reports out, like they learn, what do they always conclude? They always
Takes more touches.
conclude link. Yeah, it's always the
Yeah.
LinkedIn is the
Yeah.
channel. And then the signal quality. I mean, I think this is another big thing. We talked a lot about, or you already talked about the cross device, right? And the device divide. But like the other thing is just like because of the website pixel issues and the device aspect, like the investment in signals in your paid channels is just so much more important now. And marketers are losing that argument or that debate with InfoSec and IT, the need to invest in offline conversion tracking, in CAPI, these things are just so paramount now to get good signal back into your ad platform, and like marketers need to really paint a compelling case for that for themselves going into next year. Otherwise, your platforms are just going to are really just gonna are gonna be inefficient, at least if you look at it at a channel level. And then ad fraud, right? Like ad fraud is super rampant. If you're not installing ad fraud right now on any channel, but especially PMAX campaigns on Google, Meta, and Reddit and TikTok are enormous creators of ad fraud. You need ad fraud on your sites right now. You need dedicated paid landing pages for almost anything you're running for paid media to isolate that traffic because you can't do it against your main pages, and you need to be aggressively excluding countries and IP addresses and like all of those things. So I know for you, signal quality is definitely something you're pretty passionate about. So I'm wondering if you want to double tap on anything here, Keith.
I mean, I think that it the ad fraud and the signal quality somewhat go hand in hand. Like I've talked about the cross device, but the other key is that if you're not pushing server side data back into these ad channels, they're penalizing you dramatically. And this is coming for LinkedIn, by the way. Like more and more. Like LinkedIn's always a couple years behind Google and Meta in terms of their sophistication on this topic, but or on most topics. But at the end of the day, like, if you're not pushing in server-side events and using the conversion APIs, you're going to get dramatically penalized. especially as they start pushing more and more, forcing you into these AI formats, and these AI formats then beget ad fraud because you have less control over your placements, right? So yeah, it's walking that line there. But you can make things like Performance Max and Advantage Plus work so long as you push the signals back. That's
Right.
it.
And do the due diligence, right? Like and
Yeah.
also to set the expectation with your team. Because when you're doing those things, like you're gonna have it's gonna be pretty messy for a couple of weeks while you just strip out all the bad traffic. I think the key thing
Yeah.
is don't build retargeting initial like right off the bat with those kinds of campaigns if you can, these demand gen campaigns, these PMAX campaigns, because your data is going to be pretty messy for a couple of weeks while you figure out where the fraud's coming from, control for it, and then get that cleaner traffic in overall. There's ad scripts you can also add to help with that to get like branded search and branded things out. And then the
Mhm.
other thing is, I mean, let's talk CPMs on LinkedIn, man, because the CPMs they shrink or expand your dollar so much. And CPMs just equate to reach and the power of your dollar, right? So when I see like the same audience, and this is me using Keith's product, by the way, for both of these use cases, but like just the CPM efficiency I'm getting targeting the same audience in different channels is wild for me. And like example one is a much more of a direct response kind of client. So like we're running a lot of lead gen campaigns, conversation ads, things like that, like trying to get people into our offers. It's also a very small TAM. So the smaller the audience, the larger the CPM. That's just how the game works overall. And then example two, sales software. It's a little bit. This is a more specific sales software use case, but like again, huge CPM swings. Like we're getting $62 CPMs across campaigns on LinkedIn, $4.50 on Meta, with more reach also on Meta as well. And if you and people may ask, well, how good is that audience? Well, if you put a website de-anonymization tool where you run a little bit of direct response in those channels and just see what the lead quality looks like, you'll be able to validate how good that audience is pretty quickly, right? And you got to do things like, and I think Meta's making it super hard. You got to turn Advantage Plus, all the Advantage Plus stuff off that you can. Like it's an enormous just place of noise. It's the new audience expansion. It's bad. Don't recommend that. But anything you want to add here, Keith, and I should let you talk a little bit more
No,
extensively
no,
on
no.
some of the leads as well.
I'm loving it. I'm just nodding. I think it's the solution that most people are doing on LinkedIn, I think, is to shrink their audiences, right? In some ways, which drives up the CPMs, but it's this effort to get higher audience penetration, right? And to keep it higher quality so that, the dollars go further. And that can work for only so long, right? And then you just sort of you tap out. And yeah, I think that's it
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
So, I mean, just going the power of your dollar here, like LinkedIn, it's getting increasingly direct response for me as ad unit dollars increase. The brand awareness plays that work on LinkedIn that are cost effective, like single image is just losing more and more effectiveness. I
Yep.
think for a lot of companies, just because it's more expensive, the reach is lower. There's a lot of people running it. Like it's a known to run brand awareness or website visit objective with single image, right? So the things that are working, and part of this is just the zeitgeist of LinkedIn, but it's thought leader ads with influencer plays. It's measuring video correctly. So like a lot of people like to measure video by cost per click, and that's not the way to measure it. You want to look at cost per completed view, which, when you look at it that way, it's actually a very effective ad unit at the end of the day. It's just you have to be comfortable with exactly what we talked about, which is, it's a zero click kind of format, right? And then CTV, which is interesting because there's not a lot of overlap in audience. Like you'll serve more on CTV to people who are not super active on LinkedIn, but it does build a good retarget audience. And so I like it as an awareness play. Obviously, you get the full ad unit, you get the full video consumed. I've been seeing really nice lift from that with a couple clients that I've run it for. Um, but yeah, anything you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
add
The
there?
only other thing I'd throw out is the net, like LinkedIn. You have to stay abreast of the new LinkedIn ad formats because they very clearly skew the algorithm towards whatever's new. like image ads are the oldest, so they're performing worse. The next big one coming is influencer ads,
Mhm.
which is kind of interesting. So keep your eye out for that one.
They've already rolled it out. They have that partnerships tab now that
Yeah.
you can go find people who mention your brand and then just go immediately click to
Yep.
try it. It's a lot of employees, but you can find people off who are not employees as well. And then there's people who just do a good job organizing that also on the back end as well, right?
Yep.
And then on search, like your dollars just aren't going as far. Non-brand search has really, really plateaued with AI, man. Like AI is just hemorrhaging organic, it's hemorrhaging paid. It's also, again, these are very old and very saturated channels. And there's a lot of like any kind of manual control that you execute on Google, like exact match, which we still strongly feel is best practice for a lot of companies. Like you get penalized for that more and more. They want you to go to broad. Expanding into PMAX works, but it also leads to a lot of bot traffic. And Keith, you talked about like ways to control for that, and we talked about what you can do with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, what the challenge with PMAX is, there's not a lot you can do to constrain the algorithm. There's really just two things you can do. One is you can provide a signal inside of the PMAX asset group that basically tells Google, hey,
Oh,
it's
sorry.
it's essentially an audience, right? And it tells Google, hey, go for this audience, try as much as possible, or people similar. And then you can suppress certain keywords. Yeah, you can, if you have a big enough addressable market and you're sending back those server-side signals, we have customers who are seeing a ton of success with PMAX. But again, it's like it's a question of optimization. You can't expect it overnight. The
Right.
other thing I would say is the other area where I'm seeing a rise in just the effectiveness of our own ads is shifting more budget away from non-brand search to brand search. So chasing, it's not always the nicest move, but chasing after competitors and bidding on their branded keywords has proven over the last like few months to be by far the most effective search
I'm
strategy.
I'm admitting I'm seeing that too as well. And a lot of that is because some of those category terms are just super saturated, right? Like
Yeah,
if you want to bid in the CRM category and you're a small business, you're a small player in SaaS, like it's $100 a click,
yeah.
unless you want to really put manual bidding in place, but then you might not be courting the right people when you do something like that. So finding competitors you want to try to compete against in that space, especially if it's a
Yeah.
segmented version of CRM, like has been effective, especially with really good copywriting and really good landing page and a really compelling differentiation against who you
Yeah.
are competing against, right?
Yeah, invest in those compare pages, do that strategy. And the other reason I think is because the AI, my sense, I don't have hard data to back this up, is that you get less AI generated responses when you search for a brand term, right?
Yeah.
So your ad is therefore closer to the top of the page, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And then I think the other thing is just getting more into like the real like nitty-gritty niches. Like things we're testing right now and things I'm very curious to test with paid search going into next year is looking at like trade organizations. Like are there relevant trade organizations that have good volume and very cheap cost per click where you're just kind of arbitraging audience that way?
Mm.
And then another thing is like if you can get really deep into like I have one client is in the medical device space, and like one of the things I'm looking at with them is like medical billing codes and stuff like that their audience would search for that you can also utilize to try to again find audience where there's lots of volume and you're likely getting people who are fits for you. Other thing is trade shows as well. Like there's trade shows and events that you probably go to where your audience is there. Again, probably not a lot of competition for those kinds of terms other than the company that's sponsoring the show. And if it's something that's relatively popular, that's another good way to kind of arbitrage paid search and develop some audience and build good retargeting for yourself. So
That's a
you gotta
really cool idea. Yeah, I hadn't thought
yeah.
about the trade show approach. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you got to find areas just to test for yourself where like you're not playing the same game as everyone else. You're trying to find a new game in an old format to play.
Yeah.
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 So wanna bring up real quick just the brand TAM shop lift. So like when we're talking a little bit about these and like how does that actually manifest? Because I have a couple of examples here overall with a couple of clients that I've worked with over the course of this year. So this one client, this is the sales software client where we created a lot of book call lift, inbound in book call lift after 2 quarters. So the challenge that we were hitting with this client, we were running kind of a smaller account-based paid social strategy, and it was too focused on too few accounts. We had pretty flat inbound overall Q4 to Q1 on the year. So one of our shifts we did was we wanted to really expand who we were targeting a little bit here overall, but we also wanted to get into more channels because like, we didn't I know their TAM is on LinkedIn, but I also recognize they're on other channels besides LinkedIn. So we expanded out to Meta. We did a lot more on YouTube as well. And we just went with just more accounts. Like we went from about 2,000 to 11,000 accounts with audiences that we sourced with Primer. We vetted kind of the firmographic makeup of that for them and then went out and then with your tool with Primer we were really able to drill down on ICPs, right? Sales operations managers, revenue rev ops, VPs of marketing at certain size companies, obviously like regional sales directors and VPs. Like this is basically the ICP. And not all, I mean, this is primarily not a company focused on software companies. They're focused more on manufacturing, on medical device, on wholesale, they're on other channels besides LinkedIn. So we wanted to get onto Meta and we wanted to get onto YouTube. And we were able to really create audience with Primer and go target. Like we sourced like a 40,000 member audience on Google, for instance, and ran YouTube pre-roll. Kind of gas the CPM a little bit to make sure we got delivery to it because that's sometimes you have to do that to get the delivery you want. But man, we had great results with it overall. You can kind of see the lift in inbounds. And then the other thing that I used as a leading indicator with the client like this is like, okay, we make this change. Like, what's the first thing we want to see before we get inbounds? So I looked at share of search overall for them as a big leading indicator. When you move into these other channels, what you should be doing is generating more awareness of your brand. So for that, like I use my telescope. There's a storybook from Liam Maroney's another very interesting product as well. But like looking at share of search as a leading indicator, you can see as soon as we hit that audience expansion and like January is right when we went into Meta. Like right when we went into Meta, right when we just look at that rise in share of search overall for this company and just what that trend line looks like. And then just to kind of put this in perspective, it's not like the category is growing hugely. It's a fairly flat category overall, like this kind of niche sales software space. And like you look at the brands that we were next to here on the competitor side, the client example I have, their share of search grew 451% over this period of time, whereas they had other competitors like we really did it at the expense of another, but the other ones kind of just sort of grew a little bit. The brand four is a very new entrant into the market, so they had pretty good numbers. But I use this a lot with companies that's kind of a leading indicator before we actually realize things like this, which happened in a little bit in Q2, right? And then in Q3 it really exploded because it takes a few sales cycles for something like that sometimes to manifest. So for me, this is kind of an example of what I did with one client where we expanded out using B2C channels and got the output that we needed overall from it.
Yeah. I mean, how did you feel confident that about the quality of the audience? Because I think that when you expand into B2C channels, that's always the biggest question, right?
Yeah.
Like, are casting too wide a net,
Yeah,
right?
so one thing we did, we had a website de-anonymizing software that we installed, right? So we used Vector in this instance,
Mhm.
just to name names for transparency's sake. But we put that in, and most of the quality ICP visitors that were getting de-anonymized were honestly coming from Meta. They were not coming from LinkedIn. So like
Sure.
if you had the UTM tracking in, and like Meta was populating a ton more quality ICP fit people than LinkedIn was. Like yeah, there's a little bit of noise in there, but
Sure.
I would say if I'm just like kind of cocktail just back to the napkin guessing, about 7 out of 8 or 4 out of 5 were ICP fit overall when we were just looking at that data rolling in through Slack.
Cool. Love that. All right.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So that's how
Okay.
I was validating it. If I didn't have something like that, I probably would have ran something direct response just to make sure they had this really
Yeah.
interesting machine learning study that they ran with one of their clients that I probably would have ran as direct response to validate. But the website DNon did the job and gave us all the comfort that we were hitting the right people. And we saw it as well, like the channel level attribution, like we had booked meetings also as a goal that we were pixel tracking. And we were at peak getting over 20 25 a month in meta from it. So like we were seeing it in channel on top of on top of seeing just the overall lift across the CRM. So just a little bit more detail on that overall.
Awesome. Love
Yeah.
that.
hmm And then just one more snapshot overall and this is the other client that I have, and this is a super small TAM, and so this made this client like really difficult because LinkedIn's a really limiting channel. Like this company targets surgeons. At the end of the day, it's a B2B medical device, very similar economics to SaaS because it's a single-use medical device product that's about $12,000 a pop. The average surgeon produces about $300,000 in revenue for them, or $32,000 in revenue for them a year. Excuse me. I was looking at one case who actually this morning he was giving him 300,000 this year, so he was a bit of an outlier. But we needed an omni-channel approach really here because LinkedIn was giving us this really pronounced ceiling, right? Like we were like stuck at a certain level overall because we just weren't hitting enough TAM because they were active elsewhere. Like LinkedIn's just not a big channel for them. So we ran B2C, we used Meta and we used Reddit, we used Primer to do this. We used Clay a little bit also to do the enrichment and and put that audience in, but we were actually able to natively target as well within Primer. And then we took this very small TAM, we got inbounds up 44% year over year. This was a 0 to 100 kind of client as well. They weren't doing really any inbound before. They brought us in to get that stood up. And we've gone from what we got last year, and we are going to be 60%, 75% probably end of the year on their inbounds. And if you look at the financial impact, because we model this out, they have these surgeons are very high intent when they come in with these kinds of things because they're looking for new pathology. So they have a 60% conversion rate from inbound to the surgeon using the device. Revenue per surgeon per year is 32,000. So we would estimate like 1.5 million basically in revenue that they're going to realize within probably 12 months or so after running this. So it's about $3.50 in inbound revenue per $1 in ad spend right now overall. And expanding out into Meta has been critical for the volume and us getting there overall. And again, the quality there has been good. We see more from Meta now than we see from LinkedIn. And we could not have done this without, getting tooling that was going to allow us to target with confidence in Meta and in Reddit overall.
Awesome.
Anything you want to add here? Because I feel like this was one of like when you and I talked on
Wow.
this, you were surprised a little bit at this one because you were like, "Huh, small TAM," and like that's not typically not who you go for. It's not your target client, you know?
No, well, it's not just my target client. It's like it's a little when you think like a small TAM and you think like a B2C channel, you don't think those two things go together because typically like to optimize a Google, to optimize a Meta, you need scale, right? You need
Yeah,
reach. You got to feed the algorithm more data. So in this case, you guys are almost like overriding the algorithm and still making it effective, and you had other means of measurement which is great. I love hearing that, but it's not like, if you're an e-commerce store and you're advertising a menu, you can kind of like set it and forget it a little bit.
yeah.
So that's why. And then, you can have some of our customers are more like big market PLG companies like Ramp or Rippling, and they
Mhm.
can go really big and broad and let the algorithm optimize. So I love like again like a contrarian sort of story.
Yeah,
Kind
that's
of cool.
definitely what this use case was for. It's very, very contrarian, but super effective. And I've really enjoyed this use case in particular because I think it shows for a lot of consultants who work with smaller companies and like this is a big investment. Like it does work in this scenario for you if if you, especially if you understand where your audience actually, where their watering hole is. And for a lot of these people, it's much more so meta, and that's been something we've seen play out overall.
totally.
I want you to talk a little about through unbundling ABM. This is something you're super passionate about because essentially we've created this construct in B2B SaaS where like it's big tooling, it's big account journeys, and there's
Yeah.
instances like Isaac Ware from User Gems who's very much anti this, and I believe User Gems is a primer customer.
Yeah.
So like I want you to talk through this a little bit because this is something that I think you're super passionate about. It's something where what you do fits in really well to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what happened, with in software, at least in SaaS, like with COVID, with kind of the pullback in budgets, there was a big push towards ABM, and 6 Sense had its moment where they grew like fucking crazy. Everybody was like, "We need to get 6 Sense. We need to get 6 Sense." And then what inevitably happened with that is all this attention went towards ABM and all these startups started popping up, like biting off different pieces of functionality of 6 Sense and candidly, like doing it a lot better, right? So now you don't need to buy a 6 Sense unless you want to, but you can get a lot of the different pieces of functionality from other tools. And I think when people talk about ABM, they cast like it, they paint with a very broad brush. And ABM is a lot of different things. So, you can essentially like help yourself understand like and optimize your campaigns and reach your target market across more channels if you mix in a variety of tools depending upon your needs, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what we're trying to that's what this slide's trying to outline is you can do the account journeying stuff with a Dream Data, a hockey stack. You can frequency cap companies on LinkedIn with a tool like Fibbler.
Mhm.
You can use like our B2B rolled out sort of the first contact level
Yeah.
reveal, but now Vector has it. Warmly's added it on. We have added it on. It's like everybody's got website reveal now. It's sort of like de facto. And then you've got Clay, you've got Common Room, you've got Key Play, you've got all these tools to build your account lists that are full of different signals and data points. And yeah, so I just think there's a lot in one way it sort of sucks because you have to evaluate more tools, but
Yeah.
this idea that there's one solution that solves all your problems is sort of bullshit. Yeah.
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 I think the other thing is like there's different investment levels for all of these. So like whether
Totally.
you're a big team or a small team, you can do this kind of on the cheap. Or if you need something that's more robust because you're a bigger team, you need more orchestration, you can go there as well. Like
Yeah.
Fibbler and Zen ABM, which is a relatively novel product, but Amelia from User Pilot is a very big advocate of it. Like these are very inexpensive ABM account journey tools that you can implement. I mean, I'm talking in the case of Fibbler, you're talking like sub $3,000 a year, and Zen ABM's like sub $10,000 a year with a lot of functionality. I might add. So I'm not bringing these in necessarily advocate for any one over the other, just to paint the picture that you can build this out yourself without having to go six-figure one-stop shop tooling, and you can piece it together for what fits your budget. Like so if you need to do ABM, I'm just saying that there are options out there to consider, and you need to figure out what fits best for you and your needs, and do that. And that's really the only point of me going through this. I'm not advocating for any of these tools over the other. I've looked at them all. I've seen them all. I know people who work at these companies, but yeah, I mean, there's just options out there now to do ABM effectively that fits your need and your functionality and your budget.
Totally. Yeah. And on this point, I think you threw in here, right? It's like I think ABM's had its moment. People are waking up to the fact that it's limiting, because it's not just marketing versus sales source, right? It's everybody working hand in hand. You might need to expand your account list, to actually hit your goals as these goals get bigger and bigger. And then, if you're doing ABM, most of the time you're just limited to like sales outreach, LinkedIn, and field marketing. And I think the point we're trying to get to here is that there's ways to do ABM. You just brought up like a very niche TAM and having really strong effectiveness on a channel like Meta. It's true for running ABM programs and expanding beyond just LinkedIn And I wouldn't, necessarily do programmatic like for the same issue of like fraud and bot traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, Fibblers, NABM, these tools allow you to push like LinkedIn impression level data back into your CRM so you can paint the entire account journey, you can prove your impact better. There's just a lot of functions and choices now in ABM that didn't used to exist. So broadening your mindset there is I think the key to making it effective
Yeah.
going into next year.
100%. So let's talk about proving impact because we've done a lot of framing to kind
Yeah.
of get to this
Yeah.
point. Because one of the things that Keith and I are very much aligned on is like the idea that you're going to prove impact through last touch, first touch, or self-reported, or even sales reported attribution is a fallacy. These things are recency bias. They're signals. Like we champion and we do use all of those attribution touches. They help paint a tapestry of a story. But the real stuff happens when you are able to prove impact without having to rely on, I think, relatively weak signal there. So for me, I've become much more passionate about doing lift test and looking at incrementality as more of a long-term longitudinal test. And to me, it's just more of like a larger sample size to look at overall, where you can tell more what's impactful, right? So we talk a
Yeah.
lot about like lift test, and I think for people who are running this, there's a couple of things, there's a couple of points of tension that happen. One of which is the opportunity cost of not advertising to one half of your list or one half of your audience, right? And there's like, well, if we do that, then we're just missing half of our market for the opportunity to convert them. And I think that there's ways that you can get around doing stuff like that. Like I think that one of the truest and cleanest ways to do it is to actually split your account list and advertise to one and not advertise to the other, and take the omni-channel approach with the one you advertise to, and look at it over two sales cycles and then see the difference in pipeline. Even maybe even after one sales cycle and see if there's a difference in pipeline. I think it's a continuous test, but I think for people who can't afford to do that, I think the other idea you could float out there and utilize is doing a channel-based incrementality where you split test LinkedIn, which everyone for believes is the ultimate ABM advertising channel, and then everything else, right? So you could split your audience in half and test it that way and say, okay, what's the incremental difference between this channel and this channel, and this set of channels in terms of like creating incrementality across the business for whoever comes inbound overall. But for me, it's about justifying budgets against those incremental outcomes instead of that last click proof that a lot of people are reliant on.
And I think that this is like sort of something funny. It's like in a way generational. Like I came up marketing in the 2010s, 2020s, and lift tests weren't really something that I learned about. But if you're a marketer from the 90s, if you're like a Mad Men style marketer, that's exactly how you measure the impact of your, TV campaigns, right?
Or
It was running
billboards.
lift.
Yeah.
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 So I think as like it's kind of we're going back to the tools that we used to people used to use on a regular basis. Zoom, for example, right? They didn't invest in digital at all during their explosive period of growth. They simply did out of home, and they would do geo-based lift tests, right? They would run big out of home campaigns in certain markets, and then they would compare Memphis and Lexington and see where they got a rise, right? That's like the classic way of doing it. And it's the only real way to prove with statistical rigor if, adding something on actually is making a difference. It's
Right.
causal. Yeah.
Yeah, causal, because you just get such a concentration of impressions and spend to that against an
Mhm.
area that doesn't get treated. Like you'll know you don't need the attribution side of it to necessarily prove it to you. You'll see
Right.
little signals within there to kind of like confirm what you've seen, either in channel or self-reported or CAPI, whatever you have. But
Right.
like, it really comes down to like just putting a huge concentration towards one part and not the other, and just knowing the difference overall. And it's
Yeah.
funny that we've gone back to that, right? And it does prove that the core tenets of marketing, the foundational kind of 4P elements, the things that people proved out in the early advent of like, the Industrial Revolution and all the way through to what we're doing now, still hold true largely. I mean, we tech has invented a lot of ways to do attribution, But I mean, honestly, it really comes down, I think, to just having a method like this where you can prove it more effectively.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I think it's like a very different conversation that you can have with your finance team, with your boss, when you could go in and say, we got this much more revenue because we did this. Like I can prove that to you, right? That I don't know many marketers that are equipped to do that in the kind of the multi-touch world. Yeah.
Sure. And then like just in terms of like how would I do either of these tests? So the split test is I think very easy to do, right? Like the test like you're answering a fundamental question. What's the impact of this channel? If I were to take attribution completely out of the question, if attribution didn't exist and I wanted to put money into this channel, how would I prove the impact, right? And I always like to use it as a thought exercise as well. Like what if attribution didn't exist, how would you prove this worked? You know, like, and so what you would do is you would design a test like this. So like in the test one, you just split the account list in half at random. I'm assuming that you know your ICP, you have proper segmentation, you're building a large enough account list, right, to give yourself room to know. One way or the other, it's hopefully a few thousand at least accounts. Advertise to half that list on LinkedIn and don't advertise to the other half. Don't commit the other, but maintain every other marketing and sales activity, right? Like you are isolating for that channel. Do outbound, do email, invite them to events. Just don't use LinkedIn. And then compare account progression 2 to 3x after the sales cycle. Maybe it's not going to get all the way to revenue, but you can find at least at the pipeline level, probably what the impact of that is. And you probably are doing that more on the account volume as opposed to the pipeline dollars because ACVs can fluctuate a little bit. But that's how
Yeah.
you would test something like that to tell the difference for yourself. And going back to the opportunity cost and saying, okay, it's too expensive for us to not. Well, you could utilize B2C kind of channel testing right here and say, instead of that, we split the account list in half randomly. We load one list in audience to LinkedIn, and we use Primer, for instance, and we go to Meta and Reddit and YouTube with the other list, right? And then we advertise to each with roughly the same budget. And then we compare account progression 2 to 3x after the sales cycle. And then we'll know like how much more effective is LinkedIn than these other channels. Because, everyone, you're really trying to confirm or deny a hypothesis here. And everyone's working hypothesis is B2B is LinkedIn's the best advertising channel for B2B. And, how many people have actually tested that?
Hmm. Hot take. Love that.
So just my own thought there. I want to
Yeah.
let you walk through this other slide here and then also
Yeah.
the tactical tips on experiment design. That's something that you've been working on that fits really well into this proving impact and something that you help answer for people. So I want to give you space and then I want to save a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, so I think what I'm showing here is a new feature we're rolling out over the course of the next couple weeks. Since we control the audience, right, inside of Primer, we have the ability to create a control group that won't see your ads, like no chance of exposure, and a likely exposed group, right? So, and then compare the conversion rates of those two populations across different stages of the funnel to understand basically the incremental lift that's being created. This is built-in functionality that we sort of realized it was like, wait, this is like a no-brainer to add this into our product. So we did, which we're really excited about. And you can take it down to statistical significance. When you get to deals one, you can take it down to an incremental return on ad spend by looking at, sort of the amount of money you spent against this audience. So it's something we're really pumped to be releasing, to basically put this on autopilot, what Matt was just talking about. On the next slide, though, there are like very simple ways you can, more tactical ways you can set it up yourself. Don't have to use Primer. But you do have to, the key here is you have to invest a little bit of time in preparation. And I think that that's always one of the hardest things as a marketer is like putting out a fire. This does mean a commitment to more upfront planning. So for example, you to create the control group test group, You can put all your different accounts in two separate Salesforce campaigns or two separate HubSpot lists, and then you can measure the account progression that way, right? As they move through the funnel, and you can push them into the ad channels using functionalities in those tools. Another key thing is to make sure you have a big enough list when you split it in half to achieve some degree of statistical significance. The bigger the list, the faster the more the quicker you will get to stat sig. And then budget also matters, right? You have to get the reach in order to also get the conversions to then get the statistical significance. So these are all sort of key elements to keep in mind. And then you also have to have the discipline to keep the setup the same if you're doing if you're trying to run yeah, just it's like an A/B test, right? You don't want to change too many variables at once, right? So these are all just like rigor that I think you have in order to do this well, but it's not that hard at the end of the day, and it's really, really, really powerful.
Yeah, 100%. All right, that was awesome. So I'm gonna stop sharing and put everyone back in here, and we have a few minutes for questions. But Keith, man, that was so much fun. I enjoyed that. Enjoyed going through you so much, and I'm so glad our slides just perfectly ended with the few minutes for questions overall. So
Yeah.
we still got plenty of few people here for sure. Are there any? I don't see any questions right now, but overall, just any, and that's okay. By the way, I think largely what I want to try to conclude here for everyone is like your audience exists outside of LinkedIn and outside of Google, and we're an agency that spends a lot of ad dollars on both those platforms. But I discover so many products outside of that, B2B products on YouTube and on Meta and on Reddit. Like it's just there are, and I'm not just like on CTV. Like I Ramp is like a huge company, right? They're everyone's darling. I probably first discovered them on a CTV ad. I think like honestly, like it's just not my wheelhouse, right? But like people become aware of your brand and then kind of follow the breadcrumbs of like considering you in all kinds of ways. There's all kinds of different little entry points that exist. So I would just challenge anyone here and understanding you have limited ad dollars, but are your ad dollars, especially for awareness or for large reach, are they best spent on some of the most expensive channels to get that? And I think that's just kind of one of the fundamental questions I would ask anybody here to think about as they do budget planning going into next year.
Yeah. And then if you want to try out other channels, just make sure sort of keep in mind, I think some of the best practices and consider like highly consider lift tests as the best way to prove the impact. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Keith, man, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciated your expertise and your contribution. I will also just full-throated endorse Primer. I've used it for a year. I love the product. I recommend it to several people, several clients, and I pitch it quite a bit because I know that it unlocks channels for companies that would otherwise be impossible, especially if they're going to insist on an ABM motion. So if you're running account based and like you got to be somewhere else other than LinkedIn, this tool to me is fundamental. Just vouching for it overall. It's a really good tool. Keith's a really great person to work with. His team is involved. They reach out. They make sure you're getting value out of the product. So the service is also terrific as well. So I'll do my shameless plug for you, Keith, on
Thanks,
Fiverr.
man. I
Yeah.
didn't want to do it myself,
No,
but
it's
I
okay.
appreciate it.
I will do it
Yeah.
for you. I invited you because I've gotten
All
great
right.
value out of the product. It kind of spurred this idea as a topic.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure we didn't just talk about the tool we wanted. I wanted to be more practical in designing these things for the audience. But yeah, I mean, definitely a big fan of the tool, big fan of what you're doing.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, and saveprimer.com. Check us out if you're interested. Appreciate you having me. And yeah, look forward to chatting more.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great Thanksgiving and happy end of year budget planning because I'm sure
Yeah.
that it is going to be a bear going into next year. But appreciate y'all. We're back next month. We do have an AI topic that I'm excited to walk through, but we'll send the slide, get the recording, and we will see you all soon, man. Thank you all so much.